The Continental is out in full on Amazon Prime, 3 episode miniseries, although each episode is about an hour and a half long, so almost like 3 little movies, set in the same world as the John Wick movies. The show stars Colin Woodell and Mel Gibson and takes place in the late 1970s, so it's a prequel. It tells the story of how young Winston Scott, the character played in the movies by Ian McShane, took control of the Continental Hotel from its previous manager, the evil, racist asshole Mel Gibson. Read that however you like. So, as it usually is with spin offs, I came into it pretty worried and honestly thinking it's gonna be pretty shit because the whole point of John Wick movies is Keanu Reeves doing insanely wild gun fu. So, without that, what even is the point? Also, in my opinion, the less we knew about the John Wick world and the hotels and the assassins and high table and the rules and gold coins and so on, the less we knew about all that, the cooler it all was. And as soon as the sequels started to expand and explain the lore, it began to quickly lose its mystique and mystery. So showing us even more of the background and lore was always going to be somewhat detrimental to the franchise, in my opinion. So, how's the end result? Well, the first episode starts off pretty good by setting up a cast of somewhat interesting and varied characters and opening the show with a really, really strong action sequence, which is actually very well choreographed and strongly reminiscent of the movies. But then, even before the end of the first episode, it begins to fizzle out, and by the end of it all, I was somewhat bored. I think that the action, when it finally happens occasionally, is quite okay and well shot and well made. I think the characters are pretty cool on the surface, at least. I like the production design. Plus, Colin Woodell is remarkably good as Winston, in the sense that he actually manages to remind me of Ian McShane sometimes, even though maybe he doesn't resemble him physically. The way he delivers some of his lines and little mannerisms just told me, yeah, I can see that it's the same. It's the same person. So good job on that. But then we have a lot of problems. The story is actually not that gripping because the main plot, we all know how it ends because we've seen where we end up in the movies. So very little tension there, and the subplots are too many and too thin to care about. Like the police lady felt completely unnecessary to the plot until the twist at the end. But even then, I thought you could basically have written her out and it wouldn't change the outcome. The whole dojo storyline, I didn't give a shit about. The sniper assassin guy, Gene, I think, bordered on self-parody in some of the scenes. And Mel Gibson is just cartoonish as the villain. I couldn't take him seriously at all because he's over the top, one-dimensional, and he has so many bad one-liners. He felt like a bad video game boss. The cinematography initially seemed interesting, but then it turns out it's all just gonna be great throughout because apparently 1970s New York had no color in it at all. I also wasn't a fan of just how many needle drops there were in the show with popular songs, often completely misused and not very well fitting, particularly Pink Floyd's Welcome to the Machine. And I mean, if you really starved for some 1970s crime drama with bits of admittedly well done action, I suppose you can find things to like here, to enjoy here. It's not terrible, but it's also just not great either. For my money, I look at it like this: the basic concept is just not interesting, and unfortunately, the execution is not good enough to elevate that concept so that it's a must watch, even for fans of John Wick.